Hey there, folks. Welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art, and culture. And today, we're going to be talking about the newest album from Future, called The WIZRD. So I skipped reviewing Future's twin album release back in 2017. In fact, I've skipped covering a lot of Future's albums and mixtapes ever since I reviewed Dirty Sprite 2 back in 2015. 3 albums and 5 mixtapes, as a matter of fact. Mostly because I know that a significant chunk of them will wind up on Billboard Breakdown anyway, so what's the point? But the principle remains. And think about that for a second. Future has put out 8 projects that have had charting presence on the Hot 100 in 3 years. Even by Drake's standards, that's the sort of flood of content that runs the very real risk of, well, flooding the market. Especially if they don't have moments that really stand out or feel distinctive, have those real hits. And really, how often does that really happen for Future off those projects? And I'm deadly serious about this, because you can burn out an audience by giving them too much too quickly. Flooding the market can only really work if you can wring out enough hits or distinctive moments in order to stand out or differentiate those projects. And more than ever, I'm getting the impression that Future is hitting real diminishing returns with every project he's pushed out. You can only take so much empty flexing, dead-eyed nihilism, and swamped-out trap beats with Future's half-formed croon rapping before you start asking for a little bit more, especially when they don't play to the pitch-black darkness and the real rage that gave Future his strongest cuts, even if they weren't really his hits. And this is coming from somebody who actually kind of liked Mask Off. So why cover this now? Well, from the extensive round of interviews Future has put out recently, it seems like not only is he the most clear-headed he's been in some time, he's also showing a surprising amount of introspection. He's seen the depressant-soaked landscape of modern trap and was actually afraid to admit he quit lean a while ago in fears of losing an audience who is more accustomed to that in his sound and content. And while I can't speak to how well the possible album bomb will hit in the next week or two, underwhelming lead-off singles from a quick rollout for another long album, they gave me the impression that even Future's diehard fans might be starting to move on, which is bad news for a rapper who's coasted by on a limited skill set and dimensionality. So, might as well get ground level seats to what Future manages to pull out of this, whether we get a late game shot of quality, adrenaline, and maturity, or whether disaster is imminent. So, what did we get from The WIZRD? Well, it's a Future album. And really, while some of you might say, what the hell did you even expect, Mark? I can't help but feel a little bit shortchanged by this, if not outright ripped off. Maybe it's my own naivete to assume that when an artist does an entire media tour professing sobriety and maturity and introspection, at least some of it might show up in his music. But that comes from the belief that if you don't follow up on what you deliver, your fan base might not care, but everybody else will crucify you, especially the critics. And I have never been much of a fan, so you know what's coming. In fact, you know what? We should start with the content. And before the Future Hive rushes in to say that the good lyricism has never been the point of Future's music, I'll remind you of the projects where he actually did tap into a murky, nihilistic darkness that had at least some distinctive character within its self-loathing, like Between Monster and Dirty Sprite 2, or even just had some lines that were so innately quotable they were just so ridiculous. But with this, I'll be very honest, I would actively struggle to tell most of these songs apart. And in the majority of these cases, you could swap out half the lines on one song for another, and I would put money on even fans not being able to tell the difference. And sure, he might not be referencing lean quite as much, but it's still there amidst all the flexing and brand name porn and gunplay and taking your girl, rattled off with flows that do connect more than most, but completely run together. But what's more disappointing is that there's no introspection on sobriety or Future's greater impact, because that might involve taking responsibility and giving Future a real reason to sound so miserable. That's the biggest reason that nihilistic subtext was so damn important on albums like Dirty Sprite 2, because otherwise we're stuck with so many bars focused on opulence but no signs that Future's having any fun, because all the auto-tune will neuter his emotions. So if he's not having fun, why should I care about any of this? And beyond being interchangeable song to song, it's so boring. We'll get to my issues with the production in a second, and I will give Future a little bit of credit for trying to modulate his tone in order to keep things somewhat distinct from song to song, but he's always been a mediocre crooner at best, even with auto-tune. And if there's an album screaming out for more guest appearances in order to split things up, it is this one. on. Yeah, Young Thug and Gunna show up on Unicorn Perp, mostly to prove how redundant Gunna is in every way. And then Travis Scott puts in some time on First Off, basically to show how Travis Scott has eclipsed so much of Future's lane with more interesting, smoky production and ever so slightly more diverse subject matter. But beyond that, it's all Future for over an hour. If there's an album that desperately needs a Drake feature, it's this one. And what's so frustrating is that if you put even the slightest bit of thought into anything Future's saying, and I know how much his fan base doesn't care, but they sure as hell would care if he was saying something relevant or insightful, but this album will just start to fall apart at the seams, just with a little bit of thought. Why on Temptation is he trying to talk about resisting the titular subject when all of Future's appeal has come in succumbing in temptation and just wallowing in it? Future might reference his influence on songs like Crazy But True, but when you bring along none of the accountability that comes with that influence, it sounds really cheap, the drama has no weight, and astonishingly thin in self-awareness. If you know you influence kids to try lean, maybe it's a terrible idea to title a song Overdose and then use drug iconography to highlight all your flexing. Then there's Call the Coroner, which not only goes back to the drug abuse, but also seems to indicate that Future doesn't know what Oreos look like. I mean, you need 2 black girls and 1 white girl if you're using the pronoun they, Future, but also that he doesn't know what volleyball is. And, you know, I don't even mind that Future actually referenced Sierra on the closing track, Tricks on Me, one of the few songs that tries to get a little bit more melancholic, switch things up, but there's still no real introspection, as he spends most of the hook comparing himself to Jimi Hendrix and saying that he'll feel weak if he tells her he's sorry. Keep in mind, he was the one who cheated in the first place. The entire album is a testament to immaturity, and I know it's part of the baseline appeal, but it's the same thing I say about nihilistic art and how without more details or insight or intensity, it gets really boring really fast. And when you get rid of even that subtext, that's even more true. But again, that's me talking about the content, which I already know is the last thing that matters to most Future fans. So, alright, let's go to the production. And again, honestly, I'm not impressed. Going back to Mask Off, one of the reasons why that song worked both in and out of the context of the album was the sample, and a more distinctive melody separate from Future's vocal line. It was a point where things kind of changed up within the album. It was a different lane for him, and was all the better for it, even if the content did feel a little bit thin. The problem here on this album is that since Future is so obviously stream trolling, you don't make a 20-song album with songs this abortive if you're not going for that. The songs are all modulated to never really shift up quite that much, just to better fit on a hip-hop playlist. And that means finding moments that are actually distinctive from song to song get really difficult, and this is in the production. And let's be clear, the only reason why there are any songs I like on this album, it comes from the production. The minimalist creeping track knock on Talk Shit Like a Preacher, and the spiky futuristic synths behind Goin, Dummi, they both really kind of click for me. Even if the latter song is dumb as sand and Future's rhymes are pretty weak, there is a distinctive melodic cadence that kind of stuck there for me. But the larger problem is that so many of the actual melodic phrases are so restrained and buried behind the beat that there's no sense of any greater atmosphere. When you get good ideas like the sharper keys on Serve and Kill a Cam, you got Future's voice sounding so shredded right at the front of the mix. Or take Baptiize that tries to execute a beat switch and is just really underwhelming. Again, I'm still not really a fan of Tricks on Me, but at least the fluttery sample and the scratchy pop of the beat stood out a little bit more from the rest of the album, and thus as a whole, look, I can say, well, it's a Future album, you all know what you're getting, and to his credit, he doesn't have so many of the outright disastrous moments that he had on albums like Honest 5 years ago, but I'd struggle to say with any certainty that this will do well or is guaranteed an album bomb of the size of his peers, if only because I don't hear the distinctive melodic hooks that really jump off this album or anything really that mimetic. There isn't really a Mask Off equivalent on this project, and I could be very wrong, but if I'm not going to be all that surprised, because there have been so little artistic advancement in the content or the sound that I can see Future just being left behind in the past. And with Travis Scott on the same label, I don't even see Future getting the same priority treatment. I would put money on Future changing labels sooner rather than later, but off this album, I don't see it helping his negotiations going forward. He's in a bit of a position of weakness. And sure, look, I've never been a Future fan, surprise, but even this comparison with his best, this is middle of the road and pretty disposable at worst. I think a solid 4 out of 10, no recommendation, and I don't see good things going forward. And I'll admit, I'm just kind of disappointed with this, because with projects like this, Future shows exactly how he'll get left in the past just a matter of time. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. You'd like to like and subscribe, I'd be more than grateful. I know, a lot of Future Hive, you're gonna be angry with this, but guys, come on, it's not better than Dirty Sprite 2, or Beast Mode, or Monster. I can't even say it's better than Evol, that actually had some smoldering atmosphere, even if the low points on that album are more pronounced. This is just boring and disposable. I don't see what stands out about this project. But hey, if you want to buy or stream it, links down there below. Just don't do it in the next week. I prefer this doesn't become an album bomb. And I got the poll up there for y'all to tell me how wrong I am, although with this one, really don't think I am. Beyond that, anything else I might be able to do to improve my presentation, I'm all ears. And hey, if you guys want to help support the channel, link to my Patreon is right over there. I'm still rejiggering things a little bit, but we'll see how things go. But till then, I'm Mark, you're watching Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.